Super. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Christina Pompa, and I am a Deputy Planning and Zoning Officer here at the Office of Planning and Zoning. I want to welcome you today to this webinar. We're really excited to be rolling out our new web application for comprehensive zoning. It's going to go live on Monday, May 1st. You know, I got into this business about 30 years ago, and my first job was in Queen Anne's County, and at that time they were doing comprehensive zoning. And I remember the stack of 80 tax maps on the table with the red Sharpie outlines of all the properties that were proposed to be rezoned. And everybody had to come in the office during office hours if they wanted to see those maps. What our planners and GIS staff have done for you is put together a super web application where you can review the draft zoning map and property owners can apply for rezoning. You can do this before breakfast. You can do it after dinner. You can do it if you have insomnia at 2 a.m. It's basically available to you 24 hours a day while it's open from May 1st to June 1. So today, staff is going to talk to you a little bit about the region plans and the comprehensive zoning process. They're going to show you how to use the web tool to comment on the draft zoning map, and also for property owners how to file an application for rezoning. And then at the end, we're going to answer your questions. So again, we're super excited that you're here, and I will let the staff take over.
Thank you, Christina. Eric, you can go ahead and present, please. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Community Forum on Comprehensive Zoning for Regions 2, 4, and 7. Next slide. Before we get into the presentation, let's go over just a few ground rules on virtual meeting etiquette. So first and foremost, please be courteous. And we have the goal of sharing this information to provide helpful guidance to all attendees, as well as those catching this session on replay. That is right. This meeting is being recorded. We will be posting the videos from these sessions for you and others to reference in the future. Later in the meeting, we'll have a question and answer session, as Christina mentioned. So please raise your hand to verbally share a question, and remember to unmute yourself, or use the Q&A feature to pose questions for all to see. We'll do our best to respond either during the presentation for questions put in the Q&A box or verbally during the Q&A session. As a reminder, we are here to talk about comprehensive zoning. Please hold questions on other topics. We will be sharing individual region plan contact email addresses at the end of the presentation, and you are welcome to email those groups for additional information related to your region. Lastly, if you need assistance from staff during the meeting, go ahead and click on the chat button and type your message, and we'll do our best to help you. Now for the programming. Today, staff will cover all that you see here, beginning with an overview on region plans. Then we'll look at what comprehensive zoning means. We'll see demos on how you can review and comment on the draft zoning maps for regions 2, 4, and 7, as well as how to submit an application for a change in zoning if you are the property owner or owner's agent. That Q&A session that we mentioned is your opportunity to ask questions about these processes. And finally, we'll cover next steps and other opportunities for involvement. With us this afternoon, we have staff from the Office of Planning and Zoning who are, as Christina said, excited. We really are excited to share this interactive online tool with you. Before the slideshow, you heard from Christina Pompa. She's the Deputy Planning and Zoning Officer for the Planning Division. And we also have with us Cindy Carrier, who leads the Long Range Planning section, and Mark Burt, who leads the Research and GIS section. Providing support throughout the presentation are planners Michael Stringer, Eric Hovland, Jessica Levy, and me, Christine Duval. Without further delay, here is Michael Stringer with an overview of the region plans.
Thank you very much, Christine. So slide, please. So as we talk about the region plans, we want to put them into the context of the General Development Plan, Plan 2040. For those of you who've been involved in tracking county planning and zoning issues for a while, you know that the General Development Plan is the county's big policy document. The County Council adopted it in May of 2021. It took about a 3-year process to create it. Had extensive community outreach, in-person meetings, online questionnaires. We had a citizen advisory committee, had public hearings in front of the Planning Advisory Board and County Council. Now, the General Development Plan covers a wide range of topics from open space conservation, water resources, transportation, housing, economic development. These topics are all organized in 4 big categories: the natural environment, built environment, healthy community, and healthy economy. And as that plan evolved, 3 key themes emerged from that effort: that the community wants to see this county in the future grow smarter, greener, and more equitable. And we've been really focused on implementing that plan since it's adopted. It includes more than 400 strategies that different county departments and partners are implementing. That includes investments in public infrastructure, changes to policies and county code, and one key implementation measure is the development of these region plans. Slide, please. So today, as was mentioned, we're focusing on regions 2, 4, and 7. So 2, as you can see in the map, is over in the western part of the county, including Jessup, Maryland City, Laurel, Fort Meade. Region 4 is over on the eastern shore with Lakeshore Peninsula, Pasadena, Severna Park, the Broadneck Peninsula. And Region 7 includes the greater Annapolis area, Annapolis Neck, and the Riva community. Now, for those of you, again, who've been tracking county planning for a long time, these region plans are going to be similar to the small area plans that were developed in the 1990s to the 2000s. They'll be addressing similar topics of land use, environment, transportation, public infrastructure, and taking those countywide policies in the General Development Plan and zeroing them in to be more place-based local strategies for implementation. Stakeholder advisory committees have been appointed by the county executive and approved by the county council for each of these regions. They are diverse groups of about 12 to 15 people that represent homeowners, renters, business owners, environmental advocates, other interest groups. And this process kicked off in 2021, and those stakeholder advisory groups have been busy all through the last year and now quarter developing draft strategies for the region plans, identifying what assets and needs there are, developing vision statements. And those draft strategies just went out for public review back in April, and hopefully you all have the opportunity to take a look at that. Public engagement continues to be key to this process, and so we're at a stage now where we have another opportunity for public engagement to review the planned land use and the zoning maps that we'll talk through today. Slide, please. So, as I mentioned, this planning process is a multi-year, multi-phase process. We began with setting up those stakeholder advisory committees, doing background research to understand what the needs, aspirations of these communities were, holding community forums, doing outreach and interviews and online questionnaires. And now we're at the stage of plan preparation that's highlighted there and circled in red, where we've put out those draft strategies, and now we're ready to put out the draft zoning maps for public review. After this stage, we'll be putting out a complete package of the plan that includes the plan document, the strategies, the zoning map, the plan land use map for public review. And then we'll take it through to the Planning Advisory Board. There will also be opportunities for public hearings, public comment, and finally the County Council, which has the ultimate authority to adopt the plans and adopt the zoning maps. And that the Planning Advisory Board, we should be to them by fall of this year, and then County Council in the winter. Okay, next slide, please. So comprehensive zoning. We want to give you an overview of what this is before we dive into the tool for how to review it. When we talk about comprehensive zoning, it's one of 4 different ways that zoning maps can be changed in the county. The comprehensive idea is that it's done by looking at a broad area of the county, looking at land use, existing conditions, development activity and trends, and looking at the community's needs. The comprehensive zoning occurs after the general development plans are adopted. That way it can be made consistent with the plan land use map that's adopted in the general development plan. So when we talk about zoning, we often talk about this planned land use and zoning. Gets confusing, we understand. I'm going to try and describe the difference between the two maps because they look pretty similar. On the left is the planned land use map. The big thing about planned land use is that it's more generic and it's a policy guidance. So you'll see colors on the map that are indicative of residential uses. Those are in our yellows and browns. And then our commercial uses in red, industrial in purple, and then our rural ag, and open space in different shades of green. This allows us to look kind of big picture at how development has evolved over the years across the county and how we want it to continue to evolve in the future. Now the zoning, the big difference there is that it's more specific and it has requirements that are in code. So there are more categories for the zoning. It is actually, it includes two parts. It has the map here that we're going to show and talk about today. And there's also an entire chapter of the county code, Article 18, that includes these provisions for things like the permitted uses, the maximum density, setbacks, the height and lot coverage for structures, parking requirements. Those all get embedded in text in the code. So when we talk about zoning, we often talk about the zoning map and zoning text in the code. For the region plans, we're just looking at updating and changing the zoning map itself, not the code. Why do we have two maps? They do look pretty similar. They have similar functions. One reason is that by having the planned land use map, it does encourage us to think bigger, broader picture. Whereas when we talk about zoning, it gets very specific with the requirements and specific properties. Another principle is that when we do make these changes, we know that they are impactful to communities. It changes communities a lot when zoning changes, when land use changes. So by having two maps have to change, it creates more process. It forces the local government to be more deliberative in making decisions about these kind of changes. Okay, slide, please. So we also use this term consistency around planned land use and zoning. So state law in the Maryland land use article requires that a general development plan include a land use plan and that the zoning map be consistent with that land use plan in the general development plan. So that's what we mean when we say consistent. And we included a table, table 17, in the second volume of Plan 2040, the general development plan. That's our Rosetta Stone for translating which zoning categories are generally consistent with which planned land use designations. So this is an important reference for staff as we analyze this document, as we talk to the stakeholder advisory committees about these maps, and it'll be important for the public as they review to kind of see how these categories of land use and zoning translate to each other. Okay, slide, please. Now, before we show you the zoning map, I want to talk about a bit about the kind of changes that are proposed. The first is some general parcel and zoning alignment. Parcel geometries change. Properties get subdivided, a new survey comes in, and those lines shift. But our zoning map is static. The county council has the authority to adopt it. We as staff can't change it just by ourselves. So over time, as those property lines might change, the zoning unintentionally doesn't necessarily match anymore. And so, you know, if you've ever had a debate with your neighbor about where your property line is, you know how particular that can get. And when you're thinking about a map like zoning that's done the whole county wide, it's incredibly difficult to get that to be as accurate as a parcel line, and especially when those parcel lines can move with every new survey that's done. So this set of zoning maps for regions 2, 4, and 7 will include a number of adjustments to try to get the zoning boundary line to line up with the property boundary line. In most counties, this is administrative. Public doesn't need to see it because it's really just cleanup of a map. But again, we don't have the authority currently underneath the county code, but there is a bill currently pending in front of the county council that provide Office of Planning and Zoning with authority to make these minor changes when there is a sliver of space between a zoning boundary and a parcel boundary. The other type of change that we have is consistency changes. So again, this is going to make the zoning consistent with the adopted planned land use map in Plan 2040. And Plan 2040 included a number of those kind of consistency changes. They generally, try to more accurately reflect the existing development with what the planned land use category was. And we'll show examples of this in a moment. They also included changes to how we talk about our open space, to making sure that we are consistently applying the OS zoning district. Then we have some changes that we'll call comprehensive. These are more substantive things where there was a change. Say, for example, there was a land use change application during Plan 2040 that might have changed the density of a residential area. Then we're going to follow up with the zoning to match with that land use that's then approved by the county council with adoption of Plan 2040. And again, we'll show some examples here. Slide, please. So thinking about this issue about parcel and zoning boundaries, there's a lot of unique shaped parcels in the county. This is Cypress Creek Park in Severna Park. And you can see that it's got kind of an oddly shaped geometry there. And the image on the left shows the current zoning. The green is OS zoning that's traditionally applied to parks and open natural spaces. And the red there is a C3 commercial zone. Our commercial zones in Arundel County, as well as kind of the general rule across the country, are in a red color. And you can see the red lines of the property boundaries. And you can see that the red commercial bleeds into that park space. So in the proposed zoning, we're just snapping those colors back to match up with those property lines so that the park parcel is entirely within that OS zoning district, and the commercial stays within the bound of those properties along Route 2. Now, there are a lot of these throughout the county because this is a mapping issue that's across the whole county. So as we look at the changes in the zoning map later, and as you get to look at them from May 1 to June 1, you'll be able to see a lot of these changes around, and just note that a lot of them are just kind of administrative cleanup basically on the map lines. Okay, slide please. Now, consistency. We did a lot of detailed analysis in the general development plan. We've followed up with, again, in the region plans, looking at existing development on the ground. And this is an example where there's a subdivision. The top picture shows the current zoning. And this is one subdivision that all the lots are basically the same size. It came in and got approved at the same time, but the northernmost part of the subdivision is in an R2 zone, and the bottom is in an R5. It doesn't match where the parcels are anymore as the subdivision got created, kind of changed geometry of things. So when planned land use map got adopted in Plan 2040, we adjusted the planned land use class for that whole subdivision to be low density residential, which matches the actual built density of that subdivision. So what we're doing now with the proposed changes for the zoning map is to kind of follow suit with that and take the area on the bottom that was R5 in that more kind of tan brown color and match that to R2. So again, you'll see that the bottom picture is the proposed zoning. The lines more closely align with the parcel boundaries, and that subdivision is all one zoning district of R2. Okay, next slide, please. For the OS zoning district. Now, the OS zoning district was added to the county code back in the 1970s. The mapping that's currently adopted is based roughly on the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA's 100-year floodplains. So when you look at the image on the left, that's current zoning, you can see there's kind of two neighborhoods with a creek floodplain running through the middle of it that's in the dark green. So you can see how that cuts through different parcels. The lines kind of wander around. That's generally what most of the OS zoning district looks like. Looks like it follows stream corridors through most of the county. There are other places where it's hard to understand why an OS zoning district was applied on a certain property. And so it's been harder for staff to justify that exact location. The 100-year floodplain maps get updated periodically by FEMA. The latest one that the county has adopted is from 2015. So that 1985 mapping that this is based on is well out of date. And since that time, also the county, state, and federal government have all adopted more stringent restrictions and requirements around development, around floodplains, streams, wetlands, that weren't around when this originally was included in our code. So we're proposing to remap the OS zoning district to make it more accurately reflect what's on the ground and more accurate and more appropriately interact with our regulations. So you can see on the figure on the right is the proposed zoning, where we take that OS and we apply it to entire parcels. And those parcels are ones that have a permanent conservation easement on them. When a property comes through the subdivision process, we require that open space be set aside. We require that easements be set on floodplains, or that those floodplains actually be dedicated to the county, because the county actually takes ownership of them. So this map shows that the OS, it's still there. It's just changed to those areas that have a permanent conservation on them. And for those properties that no longer have the OS on them, remember that we have our regulations that if and when those properties ever came in for development, they would need to go through and map out the floodplains. They would need to survey map the streams, and the stream buffers would be protected by our regulations. So we'd have provisions that are more accurately ground truth and surveyed during the development review process than a zoning map can accurately portray. Slide, please. Then to give an example of the comprehensive change, this is an area near Laurel where there was a land use change application in the Plan 2040 process that was approved by the county council, and that changed the planned land use to medium density residential. So the current zoning on these parcels is R1. It's surrounded by parcels that are R10, and that planned land use matches that type of density with a medium density residential. So again, going back to that table 17 in Plan 2040, that translates and says medium density residential aligns with R10 zoning. So in the proposed zoning map, this property is then changed, or these several properties here are changed from R1 to R10 to be consistent with the adopted plan land use map. Okay, slide, please. So when we look across all three of these regions, this data here shows some of kind of the changes in overall acres within the different zoning districts. So what we have here is a sample of some of the zoning districts on the bottom of the slide. So OS, R1, which is our residential, that's approximately 1 house per acre, R5, R10, C3, which was our highway commercial zone, and W1, our light industrial zone. And on the left is the number of acres in the county of these zones. The blue columns are the adopted current zoning, and the red is our initial draft zoning. So the blue there, you can see in the OS, actually it increases the amount of OS zoning in the county by doing this mapping that we're changing here. And that's due in large part to making sure that we're accurately reflecting lands that have conservation easements, or that are dedicated to floodplains, or that are parks that currently may have residential R1 or R2 zoning on them. The R1 slightly goes down, and that's based on some of that land, again, that might have been conserved underneath easements through the development process, now changing over to OS or other shifts like that. You can see the R5 and R10 have hardly any change. C3 and W1 have a little bit of change, and that gets related to some of our larger parcels in the county that as you look at the maps and get to review them, you'll be able to see what the stakeholder advisory committees reviewed and decided on. For example, in the C3 and W1, there's some interesting things that have happened over time in development where sometimes the zoning that's current doesn't really align with what's there. Arundel Mills Mall is a great example. If you've been there, you see it's a really large commercial complex. It's actually a W1 light industrial zone, which doesn't seem quite appropriate for that space. So we're proposing that a lot of the commercial areas around that shift from W1 to C3, that'd be more appropriate. So that's kind of what you're seeing in some of the shift of numbers there. So with that kind of overview, we now want to hand it over and let you guys take a look at the actual tool that's been developed for how to review the zoning map. So Mark.
We're going to have Eric Hovland drive today.
Yes. So I'm Eric Hovland. I work with the research and GIS team in the Office of Planning and Zoning. We developed this online tool to kind of help put everything in one place for you to review the different zoning changes that have been proposed. So first we start off with the welcome page. It kind of goes over general information. We have the major elements that are available in this map, such as the draft zoning map. We have reference maps that you can use to learn more about the different areas and what is around them. We have an application form, which allows you to submit a formal application to request a zoning change for your property. And then we have the next steps tab, which gives you guidance on what to expect as the timeline for this process. So this is a two-part tool. One feature is the option to comment on the map. That's a more it's more informal than the application. It allows you to go around your community and suggest changes that you would like to see that you think may reflect the community better based on the zoning that you expect to see in different areas. So that allows you to go around and comment around your community. And then we also have the application, which is the second feature of this tool, which is a more formal process, which is more specific to properties that you own, where you would request a change in the zoning. The comment period for this tool is between May 1st and June 1st. And we go down here and we have additional information about where you can find other information on the region plan website and our hub sites. And lastly, we have drop-in sessions at libraries throughout the region where you can come in and meet with county staff and discuss the current proposed zoning. We have our summary of changes tab. This reviews the different changes that have been proposed. It kind of goes through the similar things as to what Michael just discussed. It has the same figures that we used here, discussing the aligning with community boundaries, making open space zoning more meaningful, and aligning zoning and parcel boundaries. We also have the summary statistics, which provides the values of the current zoning in acres. And then we have the initial draft zoning in acres, and we have the change between the two. So you can see which zoning types increased and decreased in acres. So moving over to the comment on the draft zoning map. We have an introduction screen. So this is where you can go into your community and look at the proposed zoning, and it allows you to submit comments. So the two types of comments is to agree or disagree with zoning. So you can zoom in and you'll see the zoning types labeled. So you can then use the submit a comment button in the bottom right-hand corner. And that opens up the opportunity where you can click on the map and select a location that you would like to comment on. It asks, do you agree with the proposed region draft zoning designated on the property? And you can select agree or disagree. And then this question is optional. If you disagree, it asks what you recommend as the proposed zoning for that property. It asks what the primary reason for your opinion is. And we have multiple options, such as reflects the vision of how the community should be, opportunity to preserve historic resources. So you can go in and select the ones that you think best fit your opinion. And then you also have the opportunity to do a follow-up one that is your secondary reason for your opinion. We have a a comment section, which is up to 1,000 character limit, where you can provide reasoning on why you feel that you agree or disagree with the zoning. And then you'll have the opportunity to put your name in, your phone number, and email. And once you click report it, the comment will go onto the map and it'll be available for other people to review and comment on. So if you see a comment that looks interesting, you can click on that comment. It will zoom you to that comment. And you can read their stance if they agree or disagree, their reasonings, and the details that they provided. You can like a comment by clicking the heart button. And you can also leave a reply to a comment. So if you agree or disagree with something somebody else has commented, you have the opportunity to provide an additional comment to that. And that concludes the comment feature. And then we're going
Eric, would you mind bringing the image back up? Just wanted to note one more thing too, just to, you can zoom out a little bit, just on the color coding of what you're seeing in here. That's a good distance. So you'll see the different colors align with the different colors in the zoning map that are the same as our current zoning map. So if you looked at any of the open Arundel or other features to be able to see a zoning map. And then folks will be interested in seeing like where are the changes. So the changes are shown in brown outline. So right by where your cursor is, Eric, if you can zoom in there. Oh, sorry. Yeah. You can click on any of those brown areas. We'll need to be patient as things load. Where there's a brown dashed outline, you'll see a little bit north of there.
Yeah, it zooms to the center of the.
There you go, right in the middle there.
Okay.
You can see that the changes are in that brown dash. So in this case, you'll see things that have changed for consistency with Plan 2040 plan land use.
And then we also have the legend here, which also provides the different labels and line types that you see on the map. Symbology. You also have the opportunity to change the base map if you want to see aerial imagery. And that will load on to the map as well. All right, so I think we're going to go back over. Do you want to discuss the application tool in the slideshow?
Yes, please. We can bring the slide deck back up.
Mm-hmm.
Next slide, please. Okay, end slide. So we're doing the application period for property owners and their representatives at the same time as the public review. And we were intentional about this, so that we wanted the public to be able to see, and property owners to be able to see, what the recommended base zoning is from planning and zoning and from the stakeholder advisory committees before owners actually submit applications. And so that way the stakeholder advisory committees got to kind of have their say at first of any changes they wanted to see in the area. And that way also property owners can see what consistency changes are being recommended with Plan 2040 adoption. So again, eligible applicants are owners or their representatives. And the tool will allow you to apply for an individual parcel or multiple parcels in one application. And you'll see in a moment how to do that. There's no fee for applying for the zoning change. For the review criteria, I want to be really clear about that for the applicants and for the public. that we have a list of these criteria here. Not everyone is going to meet every criteria, but we're going to look at where the preponderance is, and those main criteria are, being consistent with the adopted Plan 2040 development policy areas and planned land use, consistent with the established existing use, compatible with the surrounding area, consistent with the sewer service area. So this defines where we have public sewer service, right, which is an important limit on how intense and dense we can develop. We want to support increased opportunities for housing in communities of opportunity. So these are areas that have been defined, and there's a map in the reference map tab that shows where these areas are. This is based on a tool provided by the state, and that's been reviewed and refined by the county. Basically looking at opportunities for housing diversity across the county, so that we're not concentrating for low-income housing in certain areas. We want to be consistent with prior land use and zoning decisions. We want to be able to demonstrate there's a public benefit, and we want to support implementation of the draft strategies and ideas that are coming out of the region plans to address community challenges or opportunities. Okay, so Eric, do you want to show us how the tool works?
Yes. So moving back over to the Region 2 plan, comment on initial draft zoning map application. We have an application tab, and this opens up a survey 123, which is a more formal form for you to submit to request a change into your zoning. So first off, you'll select which region that you're applying for. We have the does save a draft if you're going through, so it saves draft copies. So we have the opportunity to select between a single property and multiple properties. So we'll go through both. If you select a single property, you can search for your address or select your location. So if you don't have an address and you'd like to use the map to zoom, you just hold the control button and you're able to zoom into the different properties. The parcel map will load, and you can select your parcel. This brings in the address of the property, or you can also type it up there. And then we'll go through what the multiple properties looks like while we're here. So if you have multiple properties that you'd like to submit an application for, you again get the map here, but this time you have the opportunity to draw a polygon instead of just selecting one parcel. And zooming into the map again. We would select the freehand area tool. And you click on that, and then you can draw the extent of the properties that you would like to select from. It will select all of the properties, but if you don't like your initial drawing, you can delete it and draw again. So this will give the planners just a general guidance as to what location you're applying for. And then as they go through your application, they'll get more detail and more specifics about the properties that you are submitting an application for. You also have the opportunity to type in all the associated property tax IDs. So in this box here, you can type those. You can also use the My Arundel tool to help you identify your property tax IDs. So moving on, it will then ask if you're the property owner or if you're an agent for the property. You'll fill out your information here. We then go on to the current use of the property. You're allowed to select multiple selections, and you select all uses, all land uses that apply to the property. And then we'll have a number of questions here regarding different things that apply to the property, such as is it a certified non-conforming use? You can say yes, no, or if you don't know, there's an option for I don't know. It asks if there's been a previous administrative zoning change that's been requested for the property in the past. Was a comprehensive zoning change requested for this property during the comprehensive zoning process that occurred between 2000 and 2005 and or in 2011. So it's just asking for the recent comprehensive zoning processes if there's been a change requested. It asks about if it's being the property is being appealed to the Board of Appeals. It asks about judicial appeal involving land use. Is the property subject to any litigation involving land use? And if we select yes for these, there's a pop-out box that then it will ask you to provide the case number and describe. So you would provide the case number regarding the litigation involving the land use. And it asks about is this property constrained by any private legal agreements that could conflict with the requested zoning change? And again, if you click yes, it'll ask you to describe the situation. And this is the last question here. And are there any active or ongoing zoning enforcement cases on the subject property? And if you click yes, it'll again ask for the case number. So for all of these different appeals or litigations against the property, it'll ask for the case number. Lastly, we get to the fun part, which is requested zoning. So this is your opportunity to select what you would like the zoning to be for the property. You can select one, or you can select multiple zonings. We have the justification for the requested zoning. This is again 1,000 character limit box where you can describe your reasoning and rationale for your zoning request. And then we also have an attachment section. So here you would be able to attach a PDF or a Word document. You could have a map of what you would like the zoning to be for the property, or you could have additional text or information that goes along with your request. Lastly, we have a signature box where you can sign your name and then submit the application. And this and this is just a formal request for change for your zoning for your property. So Michael, do you have anything else you'd like to add for that?
No, I think that was a great overview there. One thing we should note is that, as we've been looking at this app, you can see in the upper left that it says Region 2. So we'll have a separate app, a separate web tool for each of the 3 regions. There'll be a copy of this for Region 4 and for Region 7. And you'll access each of them by going through the Region Hub websites, and we'll give those links in just a moment. So if we go back to the slide deck for a moment.
Okay.
I noticed there was a typo as I was reading. You might notice I was stumbling over my words about these criteria. We've been, of course, wordsmithing all this stuff to make sure that it's accurate and right. I wanted to point out on those last couple of criteria, I said it correctly, but it wasn't written correctly on the slide about the communities of opportunity. We're looking for diversity of housing options in that one. In that last one, we talked about community challenges and opportunities. What we're really referring there, to be more specific, is a support of the strategies developed in the region plans. And remember, those just went out for public review, and they'll be posted up on the website for applicants or the community to reference as well as they're putting these together. So again, the application period is May 1 through June 1. Applications are accepted through the online portal. If we go to the next slide, please. We're ready to go into Q&A session, and I wanted to reiterate as well that sometimes this technology stuff can seem challenging. We will have a series of in-person drop-in sessions at libraries in each of the regions. We'll give you the dates of those in a moment. They're up on the websites as well. So if this seems overwhelming to you, you can come to the library, meet us. We can look at the maps on paper. We can help you enter things into the online portal if needed, and help everyone out as needed. So, Christine, do you want to help us guide through questions?
Sure, I would love to. Let's see, we have a question here about the very few properties with 5+ acres next to small parcels, in which R5 is necessary to have development opportunities for large properties. So let me reread that for you. What about the very few properties with 5+ acres next to small parcels, in which R5 is necessary to have development opportunities for large properties? And Jessica Levy, go ahead.
Yeah, so our draft maps will be available for regions 2, 4, and 7, and you'll have an opportunity to check out our proposed zoning for those 3 regions and provide any comments that you feel you want to share with staff or the public. And so, yeah, there are opportunities to comment on situations like that, as well as all of our draft zoning.
Thank you. All right, next question. And Mike, you touched on this just a moment ago, but for the sake of answering again, let's just go through this. How do you define a community challenge or opportunity?
Yeah, and again, we refine that to say we're talking about the draft strategies for the region, so looking at how they align. And we also received a few questions from pre-registration that we wanted to address today as well. So Christine, I don't know if you have this handy, or I could read them.
Let's see, I do not have that screen up.
Okay, I'll read a couple off. And
Okay.
one was just the basic of what are reasons one would apply for a zoning change, and that's kind of fundamental for this. As we've looked back, as we've been preparing for this next round of comprehensive zoning, we've been looking back historically at applications that have been received by the county through the previous 4 rounds of comprehensive zoning that have happened. Of course, some of these zoning applications come in from the development community, where there's land that's poised for development, and they might want to change the zoning maybe from residential to commercial, or increase the intensity from, say, an R1 to an R5 to be able to allow more to be developed on the property. But actually, the majority of applications tend to come just from individual homeowners, property owners, who may have an old family business or operation that isn't conforming because the zoning has changed, the times have changed, that they want to be able to update, or or to look at changes for their property to for their family's legacy use of the property.
Thank you for that. All right, so if residents are opposed to rezoning to commercial or to a village overlay, will rezoning still occur, and who determines that?
Yeah, this is always important. Who decides? We want to make sure that we're getting public engagement throughout, right? That's why we're putting out this initial draft zoning map for review. So we want to hear what the public has to think. We're going to get these owner applications in. The Office of Planning and Zoning staff will review them, share them with the stakeholder advisory committees for each region, and ask the stakeholder advisory committees to give their opinion as well. So you'll see tracked through the process what the Office of Planning and Zoning's recommendation is on the application, what the stakeholder advisory committee's recommendation is, and then they'll go before the Planning Advisory Board. They will offer their recommendation, and the ultimate authority is the County Council. So that what they adopt is then the law of the land. They'll be the ones who officially adopt the zoning map, so they have the ultimate decision-making authority.
Okay, and then we have a question about the process for residential to commercial zoning and whether there's a cost involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as we mentioned earlier, there's no cost for the application. A change from residential to commercial, that would be evaluated like all the other applications against those criteria we established. A change from residential to commercial would be not just a zoning change, it would also need to change the planned land use. So we would need to discuss that with the stakeholder advisory committee, as well as the zoning change, to see if that's appropriate, compatible with the surrounding area.
All right, and will region plans finalize land use decisions from Plan 2040?
Yes. So the stakeholder advisory committees have been meeting intensively over the last few months, particularly looking at land use and zoning maps. And through the Plan 2040 process, there were about 200 applications for land use change. And some of those, there was no final decision made. So we said they were deferred to the region plan process for these stakeholder advisory committees to review and to make recommendations on. So they've been discussing those. And so you'll see those recommendations come forward and then be translated into the draft zoning maps as well. You'll be able to see the kind of results of that in the zoning map. And also, as I said, when the full draft plan comes out this summer, it'll have tables listing those land use changes as well. So you'll be able to track it through the process and be able to comment on them both in this app, then through this future, the preliminary, when the preliminary draft plan comes out, and then of course, be able to provide public comment when the Planning Advisory Board has public hearings on it, and then when the County Council has public hearings on it in the future.
Thank you, Mike. And that also answers a question we got about, will the public be able to comment on owner requested zoning changes or only draft changes? So thank you for answering that as well. Another question we have from the Q&A, I'm just going to run through maybe one or two more really quickly. Are all the applications provided to the SAC members?
Yes, they will be.
Okay. And then we got a question, is this presentation available online? And I'll go ahead and answer that. Yes, we will be posting these videos after the presentation so that you can watch them at a later time.
Okay.
And with that, let's hop into next steps and opportunities for involvement. And one more, please. All right, thank you everyone for those questions and for staff for answering them. Now let's go through these next steps so you know when and where you can be involved. So for the processes we learned about here today, you have from May 1st to June 1st to provide your comments on the zoning changes and complete those zoning change applications. For assistance, we do ask that you please consider attending one of those scheduled drop-in sessions at a local library that other staff talked about earlier in this presentation. And after June 1st, we'll have the staff and SACs, or those stakeholder advisory committees, review the information that was received during the comment and application period. Staff will then draft the region plans for regions 2, 4, and 7, including the updated zoning maps. And this information will be shared with the public, Planning Advisory Board, and County Council. You saw that information in the timeline earlier. So once adopted by the County Council, we'll get the opportunity to actually implement the region plans. So please keep up to date with what's happening in your region by monitoring the website. Each region has a dedicated hub site, which can be found at the link you see here, aacounty.org/region plans. I'm going to plug that one last time because it has so much information for each of these regions. Again, that's aacounty.org/region plans. Next slide, please. All right, so as mentioned earlier and in the last slide, here are those dates, times, and locations for the drop-in sessions throughout regions 2, 4, and 7. And if you want to contact planning and zoning staff about your region, you can see those email addresses here. It's the region number at aacounty.org. We sincerely appreciate your time here, your attention here today, and we thank you and hope you enjoy your afternoon. With that, that's the conclusion of our presentation. Again, please check the website if you missed anything, if you want to rewatch, if you want to share this information, please do. We want to spread it far and wide. It will all be online. Thank you so much.